Hello guys, welcome back to the video. Today we are reacting to film theory Mr. Poopybutthole is a Morty, Rick and Morty Season 4 by the film theory. So I really expect on 3, 2, 1, let's react.
As any regular viewer of this channel is aware, I'm a big fan of Rick and Morty. It's one of those shows that is so rewarding because the deeper you dig into it, the more that you find hidden waiting to be.
I don't know if Rick and Morty Season 4 has been released. I actually don't know. If it has been released, I want to watch it, but I've only watched the 3 seasons on Netflix. So where's the 4th season? I don't know if it's come out yet, but let's see.
Discovered. So today, to show you what I got, I wanted to start off with a little mini theory, a diet theory, if you will. Diet because, well, it was something discovered and confirmed about 2 years ago, but I'd never seen it until researching.
It's a diet theory. I mean, I've seen a diet theory. It's only like 9 minutes on a Hello Neighbor diet film theory. I mean diet game theory. And this is 21 minutes. How can this be a diet theory?
For this episode and thought it was super cool. It involves this guy right here. Let's call him Rainbow Suspenders Guy. He's a character featured in the background of a lot of Rick and Morty episodes, as far back as episode 2, Lawnmower Dog. He's in Close Rick Counters, season 1, episode 10, on a bus, and even the first interdimensional cable episode protesting the rights of trunk people to marry whoever they want to.
Trunk people can get married. Who needs it?
Leave him alone, Suspender Guy. Love is love. But even before I knew that this guy was involved in some interdimensional conspiracy, his shirt.
Alright, I mean, he appears in almost every episode of Rick and Morty, so, I mean, someone needs to know why he's there. Unless the producers don't even know why he's there.
Shirt always rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, clearly those are meant to be football laces, right? But then why do some of them look more like Roman numerals? Well, that's because they are. Apparently, this guy was originally intended to be an elaborate crossover mechanism with another of my favorite shows, the secret message-filled Gravity Falls. Now, I've covered these two universes colliding a few years ago, but this actually is something completely new and disconnected from all of that. You see, Rainbow Suspenders here was meant to span both of those shows, with his appearances on Rick and Morty containing half of the secret code spelled out in Roman numerals on his chest, with the other half existing in Gravity Falls. The code his shirt was originally meant to spell out? Well, I'll let Alex Hirsch and Justin Roiland, creators of both of their respective shows, explain it.
Like, what are the odds that you and two of your friends all have television shows at the exact same time, right? So we're like, let's do something weird. Whoever cracks our code first is probably somebody who, like, stays at home a lot and is always watching TV and spends a lot of time on message boards, and maybe they spend this time kind of secretly away from social situations because maybe they're a little nervous around people. Maybe they just need a little confidence in their life. So maybe the message should be the word confidence.
Confidence? You have this like once in a lifetime opportunity to cross over some of the biggest shows on TV.
And the word is confidence. It's not a secret code and like Gravity Falls is not ended. It has another season. It's come back or something. It's confidence. Yeah.
And you use that opportunity to spell the word confidence? Are you kidding me? Because you think people at home who watch TV all the time need a little bit more confidence? Excuse me, guys. I'll have you know that I sit at home and watch TV all day and have plenty of confidence. My cup runneth over with confidence, thank you very much. Anyway, Gravity Falls ended its run before this could ever happen, so this never actually played out and the code went unfinished. At least, it went unfinished until the release of the Rick and Morty video game, Pocket Mortys. Basically, it's Pokemon, where Rick is going around collecting different types of Mortys, trying to be the very best like no one ever was. Complete with Morty evolutions and everything. Gotta catch 'em all! Pocket Morty! Now this game is a gold mine for theory content. I'll probably end up talking a lot about it sometime in the future, but I bring it up here because it's the end of our little story. You see, the longest Morty evolution chain in the game involves Mortys wearing differently colored shirts. Blue, then evolves to red, then orange, then evolves to green, purple, and finally, rainbow. And wouldn't you know it, but Rainbow Shirt Morty has a familiar looking t-shirt and set of suspenders. This time, the laces on the football are the Roman numerals 18, 1, and 13. You could probably figure it out from there, but to seal the deal in battle, you actually get to see the back of the shirt, and it gives you the code A = equals 1. So that means it's a simple substitution cipher that gives us the letters R-A-M. Apparently, Justin Roiland's a big fan of Dodge Ram trucks. Or it's actually just short for Rick and Morty. Still really cool to see the whole thing finally get used, even if the final message is a bit anticlimactic. But here's my favorite detail of this whole thing. Waiting at the top of that football design is a pattern that should look pretty darn familiar. The Illuminati's all-seeing eye, or, as fan of Gravity Falls will
Bill Cipher. I mean, it always scared me. The last episode always scared me because it was like Illuminati and stuff. It always scared me.
recognize it, the all-powerful, evil pyramid of power, Bill Cipher. Which means that, while Gravity Falls may long be over, its most infamous character continues to loom large over some of the best animation content currently happening on.
I mean, Gravity Falls might as well be a horror series for me because I was really scared of this and all the mysteries and all the conspiracies about Gravity Falls that I don't know. And the last episode didn't even cover much of anything, I believe. I don't know, but it always scared me. Bill Cipher always scared me, but now I'm not scared at all.
On TV. The hope, my friends, is still alive. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory, where I cannot wait for season 4 of Rick and Morty.
Half the season you deserve.
Okay, so season 4 is not released yet. Because if it has, it'll be blowing up on Netflix if it is gonna be on Netflix when it first releases.
All the season we could handle.
All the season we could handle? Yeah, right, Adult Swim. You and I both know that you are chomping at the bit to get as much of this show on the air as possible. Heck, your whole programming strategy would probably just be filling out blocks with Rick and Morty if you could, but I know what's really going on. You're just afraid of it running into the holidays. Even though losing viewership during the Christmas season is a complete myth in today's era of content on demand, it is a fallacy of traditional media. Get with the times, guys. Sorry, I'm just salty because 5 episodes of Rick and Morty is not enough. I want as much Rick and Morty poured into my eye holes as possible. I can handle it.
There's only gonna be 5 episodes of Rick and Morty on season 4. I don't know. It's probably gonna be more. There's no way it's just gonna be 5. There's absolutely no way.
Line it into me. Anyway, even with just 5 episodes, there's still plenty to get excited about from the season 4 trailer.
Wait, there's only 5 episodes. There's only 5 episodes. The other season definitely did not have 5 episodes, but it definitely had more than 5 episodes, but there's 5 episodes. I'm really disappointed.
The show isn't doing the thing where it's trolling us and none of this actually appears in the season, which is totally something we all know that they would do. What I liked most about the trailer, though, was the return of some of the most memorable side characters in Rick and Morty history. We've got Gearhead over here, apparently having forgiven Rick for ripping out his, more sensitive gears. The Meeseeks are back and causing havoc again. Yes, sirree! And of course, we've got everyone's favorite, Mr. Poopybutthole, who apparently has gone on some sort of tenure track and become a sort of college professor. Now, in case you don't remember, our top-hatted little tube buddy over here was first introduced in my personal favorite Rick and Morty episode of all time, Total Recall, from season 2, wherein the Smith household gets overrun by parasitic aliens disguising themselves as friendly characters. They do this by implanting false memories into your brain so that you don't kill them. Morty eventually figures out that the parasites can only create good memories, so the Smiths end up shooting all the characters they don't have any bad memories of, which is basically everyone except each other. But then there's Mr. Poopybutthole. He's one of the many characters who shows up for the first time in this episode, alongside a snap-happy dinosaur, an anthropomorphic pencil, and a reverse giraffe.
You know me, I'm Reverse Giraffe.
But when he's shot at the end of the episode, instead of turning into a parasitic form we see from all the other wacky characters, he starts bleeding and crying, and then ends up in physical therapy because of his wounds. The episode ends with the devastating line,
He told me to tell you he's sorry you didn't have bad memories of him.
Now, this episode isn't just funny, and it isn't just one of the most interesting sci-fi premises I've seen on TV in a long time. It also leaves us with a burning question. What is the deal with Mr. Poopybutthole? I mean, sure, he doesn't shrivel up, meaning he's not a parasite like all the other characters, but then what is he really? He could still very much be a parasite, just a different type of one. And you don't have to take my word on that. It's actually a theory that was offered up by the series' co-creator Dan Harmon. Quote, and it's a long one, but I think it's worth covering it all, I'll give you another theory. How about Mr. Poopybutthole? Just as where there's flies, there's spiders. Wherever there's parasites start blooming, Mr. Poopy Butthole is a different species who's more benign or more advanced. He subsists on lives like the way that hermit crabs steal other shells. Maybe Mr. Poopy Butthole takes advantage of the holes put in your memory and kind of burrows into those pre-existing holes. And the same powers that allow him to do that allow him to directly talk with the audience. End quote. Now, let me make this clear. Dan Harmon at the beginning of this quote does indeed say that this is just a theory. He doesn't say that. It's just wishful thinking that he would say my catchphrase. It's fine. But it's certainly a theory that's worth considering. So today, we're answering the question once and for all. Who is Mr. Poopy Butthole? What's his history? Is he in fact a parasite? Or is he potentially something else entirely? I'm looking across the show, the comics, the video games, and anywhere else we need to track down the truth. Hopefully by the end I've blown your mind. Just not so much so that I then have to erase it later. Let's start off with a bit of Occam's razor, that the simplest solution is most often the correct one. This is an episode where a lot of parasitic characters are first introduced, and Mr. Hole happens to be introduced in that episode. Ergo, he's most likely a parasite. It makes logical sense, certainly, but that definitely isn't any sort of proof. For that, we actually need to look at Mr. Poopy's behavior. Very quickly, things start to look a lot more suspicious about this guy. Mr. PBH appears to have memory manipulation powers similar to, if not stronger, than the other parasites. At the beginning of the episode, we watch the usual Rick and Morty credit sequence consisting of a compilation of made-up adventures and a few cuts from real episodes happening that season. Except this time, there's one major change. Mr. Butt is suddenly in each of those scenes. Now, we can't really judge the truth of those made-up scenes, but there is one moment in particular that's worth calling out. Late in the credits sequence, we see Mr. Poopy Butthole alongside Rick and Morty decked out in their Mega Man realness from the episode Look Who's Purging Now. Those are canonical events from Season 2, Episode 9, but we know for a fact that Mr. Poopy Butthole wasn't present. Therefore, he has to have some of the same powers of fiddling with memory that all the other parasites have. Except his powers with memory are even stronger because here, he's not just straight up creating a new pleasant memory out of the blue like the other brainworms, but he's instead inserting himself into the memories of an unpleasant life experience. So it seems like maybe Dan Harmon was trying to tell us something when he spoke about a more advanced form of parasite. Wow, it's almost like the guy created the show and has thought through these things. How refreshing, actually. Beyond that, Mr. Poopy Butthole does behave similarly to other characters who are confirmed to be parasites. Throughout the episode, the normal parasites demonstrate one key behavioral pattern: create confusion so they can multiply and convince Rick to lower the blast shields, thereby allowing them to escape.
There's only supposed to be 6 people in this house.
You sure about that, Rick?
Begging your pardon, Master Rick, but I seem to recall a great deal of confusion surrounding that number.
Mr. Poopy Butthole does the exact same things. He starts by downplaying the problem with the parasites early on in an attempt to get the family to stop their hunt.
Maybe you got the first one in time, Rick.
He then expresses his concern once the blast doors are lowered.
Oh gosh, it feels claustrophobic.
But it's his next line here that's particularly memorable. It's at this point, and only at this point once the blast doors have been lowered, that Mr. Poopy causes everyone to hop into a flashback memory.
Reminds me of that time we all got stuck in the elevator together. You remember that?
It's the story that prompts everyone else to take their eyes off the current situation and start flashing back into memories, which in turn prompts the arrival of the first of an onslaught of new parasites, Cousin Nikki. He's walking here! And it's Nikki's arrival that causes Beth to suddenly summon the next wave of parasites, starting with Mr. Beauregard. Let me make this perfectly clear. None of this would have happened without Mr. Poopy Butthole. Uncle Steve is the parasite that we see in the cold open, but he's isolated. He isn't attached to any other memories that are bringing in other parasites, and he's dead before he can bring in anyone else. Not only does Mr. Poopy Butthole doubt that there are any more parasites in the house at the beginning of the episode, but he then goes on to provide the means for them to multiply in the Smiths' brains by opening up those floodgates of false memory. It all begins with him. And lastly, what's the first thing Rick says about these parasites?
No, Steve put that memory in your brain so he could live in your house, eat your food, and multiply.
Emphasis on eat your food. And what do we see Mr. PBH do at the end of the episode after all the chaos is supposedly over?
Ooh-wee! Now this little poopy pants is hungry. Will somebody pass me a pork chop?
I mean, in terms of Rick's criteria for what makes a parasite, Mr. Poopy Butthole is rocking a solid 3 for 3. So it seems pretty darn plausible that Dan Harmon was revealing to us more than just a theory when he described Mr. Poopy Butthole as an advanced version of a parasite. He's clearly able to manipulate memory, but he's not restricted to just positive memories like the other lesser parasites. In fact, in an interesting twist, we may know why all the memories made about Mr. Poopy Butthole tend to be positive. In a web extra called The Poop in My Pants, Mr. Poopy Butthole looks through a scrapbook which shows some of the key events from his life, like meeting the Misses and an ultrasound of their child. One set of pictures in that scrapbook, though, shows that the Mr. and Mrs. went through the same spa treatment shown in Season 3, Episode 6, Rest and Ricklaxation, where the ugly green toxins of a person's personality are physically removed from their body. In that episode, it made Rick and Morty more chill guys before they refused with that half of themselves, but for Mr. PBH, who probably didn't end up refusing with that half of himself, it likely helped make him the pleasant, folksy force of positivity that we all know and love. We also know that while Mr. Poopy might be a parasite, he's not a shape-shifting parasite based on that same web episode. His baby is shown in the womb, top hat and all, which in turn showcases why he would bleed instead of transforming at the end of Total Recall. What's interesting though is that one picture also shows us that people of the Mr. Poopy Butthole species reproduce and grow just like a human being rather than your typical worm parasite. And that got me looking a little bit closer at everything related to Mr. PBH, because look at what this guy can do. At the end of Season 2, we see him watching the episode of the show that we ourselves just finished watching, and then he turns to speak directly to us, clearly breaking the fourth wall, acknowledging that he's on a
Breaking the fourth wall. I mean, a lot of TV shows do that. Realize they're on TV.
TV show. Now, this is huge, because for as meta and self-aware as this show tends to be, the only characters that we've ever seen address us, the audience, and acknowledge that they might be on a TV show are Rick and his family. His family, who presumably learn about our existence as an audience from Rick and all his constant fourth wall breaks, with the clearest example of this being Beth's line at the end of Season 3.
Dad, you can't talk to Jerry that way anymore. We're a real family now. In many ways, things will be like Season 1, but more streamlined.
So not only does Mr. Poopy Butthole have an ability that is only possessed by the Smith family, but now look at what he says.
Tune in to Rick and Morty Season 3 in like a year and a half or longer to see how we unravel this mess. Ooh-wee!
He uses the pronoun we, and in the Season 3 tag, we see all sorts of pictures with him outright labeling the Smith family as his own family. Now, that could all just be a casual usage of the word family, right? He's a close family friend, he considers himself a close part of this familial unit, or heck, he's acknowledging we as in the show, we, Rick and Morty. But the more you look at it, the deeper the relationship between Mr. PBH and the Smiths appear to be. Look at the Season 3 episode, Morty's Mind Blowers, an episode dedicated to all the memories that have been erased from Morty's mind because they were so traumatic or embarrassing. Each memory is color-coded. Red are the ones for Rick's mistakes, blue are ones that are Morty's mistakes, and purple are coming from the family's mistakes. And in one of the montages of memory flashbacks, we end on Mr. Poopy Butthole proposing to Morty, and it's a purple memory. A family mistake. It was erased by a member of the family, Mr. PBH. Now, here's where things start to really heat up. In the break after Season 2, which ended on the cliffhanger of Rick being brought to prison, a website was built showing how the Galactic Federation was monitoring the rest of the Smith family. It's a fun little website with additional content and Easter eggs. There's even like a Watch Mojo style video listing out the top Gromflemite jobs in the Federation. But what's interesting for our theory today is the surveillance that they do on Mr. Poopy Butthole, which is kept under the hashtag classified information section of the website. The comment on Mr. PB's entry is, quote, "Is this a human? It's weird, right?" So he reproduces like a human, he's mistaken as a human by a species that, well, not the brightest, isn't stupid. He feels an extra close bond to the Smith family. He's the only other character to break the fourth wall alongside him, and he can travel the space-time continuum with an ease only matched by Rick himself, a trait that Rick is literally being hunted down for by the Federation. So stay with me here. What if Mr. Poopy Butthole is an alternate timeline version of Morty? I know, it sounds crazy, right? But let's stop and give it some...
It definitely sounds crazy.
Thought. First, Rick definitely talks as though Morty is a parasite on his life.
You're just a little creepy creep. You party pooper, buzzkill. Boo!
He also frequently refers to Morty as the stuff that would exit a poopy butthole.
I'm gonna find some fuel and take a big fat Morty. It's my new word for because of today's events.
So the moniker and the name are kinda accurate. And a human parasite, quote unquote, like Morty, who's been following Rick Sanchez for years, would absolutely have the knowledge of them being on a TV show. He would have access to an interdimensional cable set to watch his own series, and he would also possess the teleportation ability that Mr. Poopy seems to possess. So that explains the level of knowledge that this one side character has, but it would also explain the closeness that he feels towards the Smith family, despite seeming like this outsider. There are also some surface level similarities that are pretty easy to point out. Morty and Mr. Poopy Butthole do have similar vocal mannerisms, namely Morty's tendency to stammer and Mr. Poopy Butthole's elongation of words. Listen to Morty stammer.
Whoa, what is it?
And now compare that to Mr. Poopy Butthole's speech pattern.
Got my GED.
Even their stock phrases of
Oh, jeez.
and
Ooh-wee.
are pretty darn similar. We also know from Mr. Poopy Butthole's
Okay.
scrapbook that he's Jewish, as his wedding was officiated by a rabbi and he steps on a glass at the end of it. Now, we don't know anything about the Smiths' religion other than Rick's very cocky atheism, but he does mention in this moment of total Rick-all,
Why don't you make me implausibly naive pubescent boy with an old Jewish comedy writer's name?
it doesn't mean that Morty is necessarily Jewish, but, you know, it's a start. Now, you might be calling this ridiculous, Mr. Poopy Butthole.
It's definitely ridiculous. You're stretching it, Matt Pat. You're stretching it. I stretch Armstrong.
Cole can't be a Morty because he doesn't look like a Morty. But we know that Mortys come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. What about Hammerhead Morty or Lizard Morty? Not all Mortys are made in the image of C-137's Morty. And we know, based on Pocket Mortys, the video game, and the episode Close Recounters of the Rick Kind, that a blue-shirted Morty absolutely exists, just like the color that Mr. Poopy Butthole wears. But there are other biographical details that we get from the Poop in My Pants that take the parallels between Morty and Mr. Poopy Butthole from interesting to uncanny. We learn from his scrapbook that Mr. Poopy Butthole went to Henry Herpson High School, the same exact school that we see Morty going to. Though, of course, he goes to one that's under the control of the Galactic Federation, as we can tell from the flag hanging outside the building. This alternate reality that Mr. Poopy Butthole lives in also has Cronenberg creatures, since we see Mr. and the future Mrs. Poopy Butthole on the back of a Cronenberg. Remember, the Cronenbergs are those twisted nightmare creatures with arms and legs coming out of everywhere. But they wouldn't exist without a Morty in that universe, since Morty's desire to date Jessica and Rick Potion number 9 was the root cause that led to the Cronenbergs in the first place. But the kicker here is on the page of the scrapbook where we see Mr. Poopy Butthole's son being born. There's a congratulations card shown to us that, when we look very carefully, is signed by Summer. So that establishes a strong
Summer.
relationship between Mr. Poopy Butthole and Summer. But
Okay.
here's the catch. It can't be the Summer that we know from Earth C-137. Look at the prescription written next to the picture of Mrs. Poopy Butthole's ultrasound. The date on the prescription shows us that it's from the year 2345. Now, this is important, because for all of the sci-fi madness that Rick and Morty has, one thing the creators have sworn off is time travel.
We never mess with time travel.
So much so that at the end of the episode, The ABCs of Beth, Rick outright lampshades that he didn't use time travel to get the family some pizzas.
By the way, that wasn't time travel. There were just a couple pizzas on the counter. I grabbed them.
Meaning that the Summer that we know and love can't be the person to have written this note. It's too far in the future. She would have been dead long before Mr. Poopy Butthole's wife got pregnant. In other words, in Mr. PBH's universe, there has to be a new and different version of Summer, since we know, based on the Cronenbergs in the pictures, that there also has to be a Morty somewhere in this universe. It could be that maybe Mr. PBH is that universe's Morty. That does give us the question of where his Rick would be, but honestly, Rick could have died. Mr. Poopy Butthole is clearly older. It's also not that hard to believe that Rick and Morty could have gotten separated. They get separated in a lot of different timelines. And if Mr. Poopy Butthole feels all alone in his Cronenberged world, well, that could explain why he would travel to Earth C-137 in the first place, in order to try to integrate himself into a different version of the family that he knows and loves, and manipulate their memories so he can live and stay with them. Live with them as the family that he lost in his own timeline. So is Mr. Poopy Butthole a parasite? Yeah. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of the Rick and Morty universe, all the characters are parasites. At the end of Morty Night Run, the fart that poops gold tells Morty that he plans to exterminate carbon-based life, saying,
Carbon-based life is a threat to all higher life. To us, you are what you would call a disease.
By that appraisal, Mr. Poopybutthole is in fact a parasite. So is Rick, so is Morty, and so are we. Wubba-lubba-dub-dub! But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And...
So yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Of course, peace out, peace, peace.